So today we're going to be checking out the Ever Crisis The First Soldier bonus story, 3X Soldiers, which gives us the backstory on what happened to Glenn and crew after they defected from Shinra and then began working with Rufus. We're also going to be checking out some info from Naoki Hamaguchi in regards to whether we could see the Final Fantasy VII Remake combat system in future games. So, let's talk about it. Alright, so before we get to the Ever Crisis recap, there was an interview with Naoki Hamaguchi that released earlier today where he makes some rather interesting comments on whether or not the 7 Remake combat system could be used again in the future. This interview comes to us from Daniel Bloodworth of Easy Allies, who got to speak to Hamaguchi during Tokyo Game Show this year. Now, I have to give massive props to Bloodworth for asking this question, as well as Michael Damiani, who is also from Easy Allies, for providing Bloodworth with the question. And this is cool, because I don't think I've ever seen anyone ask this specific question to Hamaguchi or anyone on the Remake team. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially Bloodworth asks Hamaguchi, you guys worked really hard on the Remake combat system. Could you guys utilize it again in the future for another Final Fantasy game or potentially a new IP? Now, Hamaguchi's response is a little bittersweet, but essentially he says that he doesn't foresee them using the combat system from the Remake Trilogy the way that it currently is now in future games. Primarily because as developers, they want to keep things fun and fresh for players. They want to provide something new. But he says that there is a possibility that they could take what is essentially the foundation of this combat system, rework some things, and evolve it, push it forward, and then use that for a new game. So while that sounds like we won't see the current combat system utilized the way that it is, I do like the idea that Hamaguchi is still pretty open-minded about just reworking the combat system and changing some of the foundation and building a new structure on top of what they did with the combat system for the Remake Trilogy for something new. And when it comes to this combat system, I've sung its praises for so long on my channel. It's my favorite combat system in a video game. It scratches that itch in my brain that loves turn-based, but it also scratches that itch in my brain that really loves real-time action. And I really feel like it's a combat system that just has so much untapped potential, and to at least know that he's considering the idea of taking the bones of this combat system and doing something different with it, that is pretty reassuring. Now, there is a possibility that that could show up in something like Final Fantasy XVII. Now, this is me just pulling stuff out of my butt and throwing it at the wall, but it is possible that perhaps CS1 is working on Final Fantasy XVII. And I say that because recently Hamaguchi's been doing a ton of interviews, and he's really talked about kind of like the size of the team. There are people working exclusively on Remake Part 3, people working on the ports of Remake and Rebirth, and then there are people who are going back and forth between the two projects. So it's possible that perhaps there's another group who is working on what would be the skeleton of Final Fantasy XVII, and then when CS1 is all finished with Remake Part 3, the game comes out, they do their ports, they can turn their full attention to a Final Fantasy XVII, where that combat system that's reworked could potentially show up. And again, that's just me guessing and hoping. There's nothing concrete about that right now, but I loved that Bloodworth asked that question. Again, I don't think I've ever seen anyone ask Hamaguchi that question, so to get a definitive answer instead of us just continuing to speculate on whether or not we're going to see this combat system again, it's really nice. I'll leave a link in the description down below so you guys can check out the full interview with Hamaguchi and Bloodworth. It's a really good one, kind of short, but Bloodworth asks some really great questions in regards to the trilogy. So up next, we move over to the First Soldier bonus episode, 3X Soldiers, which focuses on Glenn, Matt, and Lucia after they've defected from Shinra and eventually decide to start working with Rufus to take back Wutai. Now, I captured this footage myself, and for whatever reason, whenever I boot up Ever Crisis on my computer, my taskbar on the bottom of the screen will not go away, so I had to crop it out, so excuse the weird cropping, but yes, I captured this footage myself. Now, in regards to this episode, they kind of Tarantino it by jumping all over the place when it comes to the story. So sometimes it's present day, sometimes it's a flashback, sometimes it's a present day that goes into a flashback, so the order of which you learn the information is a little jarring, so you'll just have to bear with me. I'm trying my best here. But we start off with Glenn, Matt, and Lucia and a bunch of their comrades celebrating a big win that they just had against Shinra. And we learn that after they defected from Shinra, they were on the run but decided to try and settle down, create their own home. So they found land, like-minded people, and built their own town. They even had commerce, and everything was going beautifully. Until Rufus, Shinra, shows up one day with an offer. And his offer to the group is, hey, I see what you guys are doing here. What you're doing is gonna overlap with the type of world that I want to build. So I want to fund you guys and help you out. But of course, the crew isn't stupid. Matt, who's incredibly intelligent, goes, dude, I got information. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to overthrow your father. And because they know they can't trust Rufus, he just flat out tried to lie to them. They're like, look, we're going to decline the offer. We're going to go our own way. Good luck with whatever you're trying to do. Now, after this conversation takes place, the town that the group built mysteriously gets set on fire and is completely destroyed. I believe Glenn refers to it as burned to ash. And in the moment, they're led to believe that there was a traitor in their midst who was working with Shinra. And after all of this goes down, they realize, look, we're never going to escape Shinra. We're going to have to start over from scratch, but with a new purpose. Now we jump back to the beginning of the episode with Glenn, Matt, and Lucia celebrating their win, and they're giving this big speech to all of their comrades saying, like, this is just the beginning. We have to work even harder to defeat Shinra and eventually gain the support of the Wutaians. And we learn that Glenn, Matt, and Lucia have formed some sort of committee that is fighting back against Shinra, which we will learn more about a little bit later. And as Glenn is giving this speech, he mentions Saruf, how he's going to help us take back Wutai and beat Shinra. And of course, we know that Viceroy Saruf is Rufus. So he's their ace in the hole, if you will. They're not outright telling people that Rufus is a part of this because that would just blow up the whole operation. So they just refer to him as Saruf, this figure in the background who's funding them, helping them take back Wutai. Don't you just love this Viceroy Saruf figure? Now we jump back to present day where Glenn and the crew are discussing their plans and they're just waiting for Rufus to show up. But the whole idea is that they've actually been making some headway with this committee that they formed. They've pushed super far into Wutai, they've established a headquarters, and they've had a bunch of like-minded Wutaians join them in their effort to fight back against Shinra. But they don't have the full faith of the Wutaian people just yet. So this operation that they're planning has to succeed, because if it doesn't, everything falls apart, and they really truly need the trust of the Wutaian people if they're gonna succeed in this mission. And this is a big deal because the people of Wutai are all about tradition. They trust their government, the Wushang, those 5 warriors, but they're losing a little bit of faith. So if this new group can come in and they're working with other Wutaians, that sends a really big message to them of, oh, perhaps we can trust this group, this committee, this Viceroy Saruf. And that's essentially the goal of this specific mission, is to fight back Shinra, support the Wutaians who are fighting, win, and now they're sitting really pretty with a lot of Wutaians. And this part is really big because Matt mentions that the Wushang, those Wutaian warriors, aren't really doing much of anything. They haven't said anything, they've been sitting out on the battle, so the Wutaian people are frustrated. Their own leaders aren't helping them. They're not speaking out, they're not fighting back. They're pretty complicit at this point, so that's really helping bolster this committee and getting more people from Wutai to join them. So that is really cool because it has some implications for Remake Part 3, which we will touch on after I do the recap and we do a little bit of a discussion. But it's pretty interesting that they're diving deeper into the fact that the Wushang aren't doing anything. And it's interesting because the manipulation goes a little bit further, because if Glenn and crew can win this battle, then he can sing the praises of this mysterious Viceroy Saruf. And because the people already trust Glenn, they're going to take his word on Viceroy Saruf, and then by proxy, they will just accept him. Now we jump back to the past. I'm going to take you back to the past. And we see how this committee was formed. So after that fire happened, Glenn and his crew decided, we got to do something to rebrand here. We got to find a new purpose. So they create what's called the Shinra Resistance Committee, the SRC, and they make some waves. They fight back against Shinra, they make a little bit of noise to the point where they get Rufus's attention again, which is what they wanted. So they realize, better the devil you know. We team up with this Rufus dude who, isn't super trustworthy, but seemingly kind of aligns with us and our goal, so maybe we should join him. But obviously Glenn and the crew aren't just going to be like, yeah, let's join forces. He still has that feeling in his gut that I can't fully trust this Rufus character. So Rufus is like, okay, in a show of good faith, how about we run a joint mission together? It'll act as a little trial run to show you that I mean business and that we can actually work together. And again, Rufus this whole time is really trying to butter them up. He's like, look, you've got me, which means you have unlimited access to Shinra, unlimited funding. I really want to take these guys down just as bad as you do. But we all know Rufus has other plans. So Glenn and the crew decide to go on this mission to a wasteland in the Wutai area, but they get this vibe that something just isn't quite right. And they're correct to trust that vibe because a helicopter shows up, and who steps out? Sephiroth. This was not in their plans. They don't know how it happened, but it throws a massive wrench into what they were planning to do on this little excursion. It's in that moment they realize, hang on, the only other person that knew about this plan was Rufus. Was this him giving us a warning saying, hey, look what I can do. If you guys cross me, I will screw you over so hard by sending in freaking Sephiroth. And they also put two and two together and realize, oh, that person that burned down our village, that was not some traitor connected to Shinra. That was someone who did that because Rufus wanted them to. It was someone working for Rufus. So even though in that moment they're hurt and they're kind of upset, they realize, okay, maybe Rufus is actually putting his money where his mouth is. Maybe he really truly does mean business because this is how serious he is. He's telling you, look, I'm about that life. And if you mess with me, you're going to be on the ground essentially. And in that moment, they decide, okay, I guess the SRC is going to start working with Rufus. And they realize they have to join Rufus because they can't take out Shinra on their own, and they can't even take out Rufus on their own. So again, I like that phrase of, better the devil you know. These are both awful options, but you're at least familiar with one of them. So, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they officially join forces to take down Shinra. Now what's interesting is when they go back and speak to Rufus, he's really selling them on this whole image of, yeah, we're the good guys, we're gonna beat Shinra. He repeatedly tells them like the goal is to fight with all your heart, which aren't completely empty words. He's telling them this because they need to set an example for the people of Wutai, like, hey, we mean business. We're here to fight for you guys. We want to push Shinra out. You can trust us. So Rufus certainly has a way with words. He's incredibly manipulative, and just knowing where this partnership ends is really brutal. Now, jump back to present day, and they're still speaking with Rufus on this cliffside, and Glenn's like, look, okay, everything's going great, we're performing well, but like, what else are you planning here? Like, this can't just be the only thing you've got going. What's the bigger picture? What happens after we actually beat Shinra? And of course, Rufus is being a little dodgy. He tells him, like, your goal's not going to change. It's going to be the same, essentially help people. Show them that you're going to fight for them, and it will spread to the rest of the world. So, again, Rufus, you dirty dog. Cut to a little bit further in the story, and this big war that they have planned out is about to go down, and we see the SRC. They've got some new recruits, as well as some former ninjas who were working with Wutai. They decide to join the SRC in this big battle against Shinra. And this is Glenn giving everyone a pep talk like, look, no matter what happens, we push forward. Even if we fall, the mission continues. We do what we need to do to stop Shinra. And this fight in particular is pivotal because they're going after Shinra's frontline forces, the strongest of the strong. If you can take them out, you can push further, and it's going to be so much easier. Now, as the battle rages on, they unfortunately do lose some of their people, but in a surprising turn of events, they win the fight. They beat Shinra. And because of this, the Wutaian people now completely trust them. They did something that seemed pretty much impossible. They took down Shinra. And because of this, word spread, so you now have other committees popping up around the world and other people now going to Wutai, making the journey to specifically join the SRC in their fight back against Shinra. It's worldwide, prestige worldwide is essentially what they're doing. This is a really big win for them. Now, flash forward a little bit later, and the SRC are still doing heated battle against Shinra. This is a full-on war now, and things are pretty much a stalemate. Wutai is running out of resources, but the big sticking point here is, again, the Wushang are silent. They haven't said anything, they haven't done anything, or provided any kind of support. Again, hold on to that. We will get to it at the end. Now, as the war continues, things aren't looking so great for Wutai, but they do catch a break, because in this moment, this is when a bunch of soldiers at Shinra suddenly start disappearing. So it's a little bit of a boon for the SRC, and in this moment, Rufus tells him, look, Sephiroth is headed your way. He's been assigned to go to Wutai to look into this disappearance when it comes to our soldiers, and he's not going to come alone. Now, it's only in this moment when Sephiroth and the Shinra soldiers show up in Wutai that Wutai actually decides to do something for once. And they send a bunch of their own soldiers to fight back Sephiroth. But of course, this is Sephiroth. They do the best they can, but ultimately he wins, which ends up playing into the favor of the SRC. How so? Well, the SRC ends up using the chaos of this war, the fact that Sephiroth showed up, to stage a coup. So now once things have ended, looks like the SRC are now the ones in charge. They end up staging a provisional government led by the SRC in this Viceroy Saruf, and they tell the people of Wutai, look, you guys are going to be the ones in power. You are going to determine who your new leader is going to be. Doesn't that sound nice? Also, how about that Viceroy Saruf? Wouldn't he make a good choice to be a leader? And that is the end of this specific episode. Rufus, the SRC, have made massive headway in Wutai. They now are essentially in control. They have everyone in the palm of their hands and have essentially created this massive revolution that has gotten the Wutaians to drop their traditions and trust this new group that proved that they can defend them. Now, obviously we know there's still more to the story of Glenn, Matt, and Lucia and Rufus. We know that eventually things turn sour between Glenn and Rufus in an act of cowardice, shoots Glenn when his back is turned. So we don't know exactly what leads up to that moment. I'm assuming that this event may have one more episode that kind of dives a little bit further. Maybe it's this month, maybe it'll be in the future, but we know that there's still more to this story. But episodes like this are why I truly, really love what they're doing with Ever Crisis, because they take the stories that we're all so familiar with, but now they can add so much more detail into how things actually went down. And in Rebirth, Yuffie talks about this Viceroy Saruf, this revolution that was led by him to fight back against Shinra when the Wutaian government wouldn't do anything. And I like that because now that's going to add even more layers into Yuffie's story heading back to Wutai. The fact that she wanted so desperately to fight back against Shinra, but her own family, her father, the Wushang, wouldn't do anything. They didn't speak up. They didn't provide any support to the SRC. They just let their people be massacred and taken over by Shinra. And it was only this Viceroy Saruf figure in this General Lodbrok, Glenn, who actually did something about it. But I'm curious to know, will Yuffie find out the actual nitty-gritty, the ins and outs of how this revolution came to be, and the fact that it was actually Rufus who, was kind of at the core of it, and will that change her view on all of the stuff going on in Wutai, on Shinra? But it really just sets up so much beefier story stuff for Yuffie and the return to Wutai. Really filling in that backstory and letting her know, like, oh, okay, yeah, this is why she's so upset. This is why she's so angry, is because her own people wouldn't do anything. They had to turn to an outside group for help. I feel like it also adds so many more layers to a character like Rufus, because again, we know how this partnership ends. It does not end well for Glenn. Matt and Lucia do, I'm assuming, escape because they do get name dropped in Rebirth, so we know they're still alive. They're still fighting the fight against Shinra. But the fact that Rufus clearly has ulterior motives, but he joins Glenn in the crew and paints this pretty picture to them of, yeah, we're gonna have a world without Shinra. And Glenn, Matt, and Lucia are genuinely really great people. They initially joined Shinra because they thought they'd actually be able to travel the world and help people, but by being in Shinra, they saw firsthand how devastating this company was to the whole world outside of Midgar, the people that they hurt, the lands that they destroyed. It didn't sit well with them, which is why they decided to defect and then eventually fight back against them. So for Rufus to come in and manipulate these kind-hearted people to further his own agenda, it's super twisted. And it makes him an even more layered character. So again, we have no confirmation as of right now, but I'm assuming there has to be at least one more episode for the 3X Soldiers storyline to really kind of flesh things out and lead up into what we saw in Rebirth, where Glenn, unfortunately, is murdered by Rufus. Now, as for the finale of episode 2 of The First Soldier, there is no date for that just yet, but if I had to assume, I think they will drop it on October 15th. They like to drop their new episodes for Ever Crisis in the middle of the month. So I'm assuming sometime soon they'll put out a trailer for that and tease it, and again, set your expectations accordingly, but because this is a finale, I'm anticipating that they may drop some more big story bombs on us, because that's what they did in the episode 1 finale. They revealed, hey, Sephiroth's on the edge of creation, and it tied everything back to the Remake trilogy. So maybe they could do that for the finale of episode 2. What could that entail? I don't know. Does Genesis show up? Does a second Sephiroth show up on the edge of creation and decide to play tic-tac-toe with the previous Sephiroth we saw? No idea, but I'm hoping something cool happens that does tie back to the Remake trilogy. Now, with that being said, that is the video. I am Curious Corduroy. Let me know what you guys think about what we covered in today's video, whether it was the comments from Hamaguchi on the 7R battle system or what we covered in the 3X Soldiers story. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.